I, 29F, never thought I'd be in this situation. My husband, 31M, and I have been married for 4 years, and we've always talked about having kids someday. But we weren't trying for a baby. We were actually being super careful. I was on the pill, and we were using condoms too. Somehow, despite all that, I ended up pregnant anyway. Talk about a shock. When I first saw those 2 lines on the pregnancy test, I felt like I was going to pass out. We're not exactly rolling in cash right now, we both have decent jobs, but we're still paying off student loans and saving up for a house. The thought of adding a baby to that mix was terrifying. I was so nervous to tell my husband. I expected him to freak out or maybe even suggest we terminate right away. But he surprised me by being really supportive. He sat down next to me, held my hand, and said we'd figure it out together if I wanted to keep it. He told me it was ultimately my decision, but that he'd support me either way. After a lot of late-night talks and budget crunching, we decided to go for it. We figured we could make it work if we were careful with money and maybe got some help from our families. I started taking prenatal vitamins, and we even bought a couple of cute onesies. We were scared, but excited too. Fast forward to my 20-week scan. I was lying there on the table, giddy about seeing our baby on the screen. But the tech got really quiet and kept going over the same areas again and again. She called in the doctor, who looked concerned and said they saw some red flags. They ordered more tests, trying to reassure us, but clearly worried. That week of waiting was hell. We tried to stay positive, but I could tell my husband was as terrified as I was. When we finally got the results, it was worse than we'd imagined. Our baby had a rare genetic disorder that would mean severe disabilities. The doctor talked about cognitive impairments, physical deformities, and a whole host of potential health issues. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. We were barely prepared for a healthy baby, let alone one with complex medical needs that would probably need care for their entire life. My husband looked shell-shocked. He kept asking questions about treatments and prognosis, but I could barely hear anything over the roaring in my ears. That night, after my husband fell into an exhausted sleep, I stayed up researching. The more I read, the more terrified I became. The medical costs alone would bankrupt us, not to mention the lifelong care our child would need. What kind of life would they have? What would it do to our marriage, our careers, our future? Without telling my husband, I scheduled a termination. I told him I needed another scan to confirm some things, but instead I went through with the procedure alone. It was so much harder than I expected, physically painful and emotionally devastating. I cried the entire time, feeling like the worst person in the world. Afterwards, I told him I had miscarried. He held me while I sobbed, having no idea what really happened. I suggested we wait a few years before trying again, when we're more stable and ready. He agreed, telling me he loved me and we'd get through this together. It's been 3 months now, and I'm drowning in guilt. Should I have given him a choice? Could we have managed somehow? What if he finds out someday? The secret is eating me alive, but I'm terrified of how he'd react if he knew the truth. Would he leave me? Would he ever be able to trust me again? I don't know how to move past this. No one else even knows I was pregnant, so I have no one to talk to. Every time I see a baby or a pregnant woman, I feel like I'm being stabbed in the heart. I'm hoping that someday I can forgive myself, but right now it feels impossible. Edit. Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like this. Thank you all for the support and advice. I'm overwhelmed by the responses. To clarify a few things. Yes, I had all the proper testing done, including NIPT and amniocentesis. I didn't go into detail in my original post because it's still really painful to talk about, and I was trying to keep things somewhat anonymous. I'm considering telling my husband the truth after reading your comments. It's scary, but maybe it's the right thing to do. If anyone has experience with confessing something like this to a partner, I'd appreciate any advice. To those questioning my story, I get it, but please understand how hard this was to write. I left out a lot of details because I'm not ready to relive every moment. This is the first time I've told anyone about this, and I was shaking and crying as I typed it out. For those asking about the specific disorder, I'd rather not say, as it's quite rare and I'm worried about being identified. But it was severe enough that the doctors were very clear about the quality of life our child would have had. Again, thank you all. Your kindness means more than you know. I have a lot to think about, but I feel less alone now.